Hey everyone! Before we open today's file, please make sure to follow us on Instagram at d.s.radio, where you can find all the images that go along with today's case. You can drop us an email at contact.dsradio@gmail.com. You can find all of our socials in the Linktree bio on our Instagram profile, including links to merch. If you're feeling especially generous, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/dystopian simulation radio, where you can get access to our exclusive Instagram page and make suggestions for upcoming episode topics that you would like us to cover. Speaking of Patreon, thanks to our Patreons, Riff Cult, Cropley Crab, Cash Broadus, Raspberry Jr., Jason R. Nelson, Creepy Paper, Jamie Sook, Michael Laughlin, Lindsay Keller, Mike Wright, Greer Weaver, Kelsey Carruthers, Linz Gibbon, Drake Holvig, Only Child, Michael M, Wesley Akers, Riaz K, Emily Medeiros, Pip, Heather Wynn, Graves, Devon Sweatshirt, The Ordained Sinister Minister, and Philip Hoffman. Hi everyone, and welcome to Dystopian Simulation Radio. I'm your host, Linz.
And I'm your host, Chris.
How's it going, Chris?
It is going pretty good, Linz. I can't... Are you eating chips?
Oh, don't mind me. Please, just carry on there.
They sound like Pringles?
No, it's some sort of Scandinavian hard bread. Comes in a big circle. Anyway, please. Continue. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm crunchy. I mean, I'm just peachy. I'm great. Yeah. We had the Tom DeLonge episode out.
Yeah.
Last
we
week.
did.
That's why we're recording this now.
Yeah. I think people we had like a good response to it.
Yeah. Anyone who's
Sorry, I'm just so hungry.
What do we call that thing? Is it misphona?
Oh yeah,
misphonia. Anyone who's got misphonia is like hating this right now.
But Chris, I've just been feeling so hungry. You know, it's like no matter how much I eat, I just don't feel full. Anyway.
No, I mean, I've felt like that before. I've got very hungry caterpillaritis, I feel, but yeah, the Tom DeLonge episode, people seem to love it. Tom, you haven't reached out yet. I'm waiting, buddy. Some might say, where are you?
Where is he?
Where are you, Tom? I just want to interview you and hear about all your crazy shit. So come on to the podcast.
Oh my God, did you come up with that in work?
No.
Was that off the fly?
It was just off the fly.
All right, Dr. Dre. So... Sorry, I couldn't continue.
Where are you going with this bit?
What bit?
Well, you don't usually eat on the podcast. So what's going on, man? You feeling so hungry?
Yeah, well, I think it might have like something to do with today's story. I feel like I just absorbed something from it. And now I don't know, I just feel like a bottomless pit, Chris.
Another cannibal story, eh?
Not possibly, but not entirely. Should we advertise things and then maybe we can just get into it, because I'm starting to feel really faint.
Oh, faint. Oh no.
Yeah, I'm just so hungry.
Tell me if you need a doctor.
I will do.
I'm a doctor of music. I need a doctor. That was not a very good album. Right.
Yes.
So, advertising stuff. What do? We do a podcast. Hello. Are you listening to us? Is your name Tom DeLong? Then maybe you're listening to us for the first time. We are a podcast that is all about the unusual, unknown, and the paranormal. Yes. We you can follow along by going over to our regular old Instagram page, which is
d.s.radio,
where you can find all of the images associated with today's episode. And if you sign up to our Patreon, which is
patreon.com/dystopian simulation radio,
then you not only get access to the Patreon with exclusive episodes, but you get access to our exclusive Instagram account, which is
DS our friend club.
Well done.
Yes.
Well done on getting the name of our Instagram right. So thank you to all of our podcasts. Thank you, Philip, Pip, Duran, Mark, Emily, Riaz, Wesley, Michael, Only Child, Drake, Linz, a different Linz with an S, not a Z, Kelsey, Greer, Mike, Lindsay, another Lindsay, not you, a different one, Michael, Lorna, Jamie, Creepy Paper, Jean-Philippe, Jason, Raspberry, Cash, Cropley Crab, Riff Cult, Heather, Graves, Devon, and Ordained Sinister Minister.
Whoa, we're actually getting quite a DSR army now.
We do.
Kind of impressed. That was a long list. I like it.
I feel like
keep them coming.
We could invade a micronation.
We could invade the town of Ownershop where Arnold with the Cannibal Museum lives. Remember, he had a micronation.
Don't spill the beans.
Yeah, we could invade. He often invades towns nearby, so we could invade.
He often invades towns nearby.
He does? They do. They really do.
Is it just temporarily while he's doing his shopping?
No, they just do raids. They sometimes organise raids on the nearby villages and things. Yeah.
Excellent.
So I think it's about time someone raided them, and I think it could be are we the micronation of dystopia now? Is that what we are?
Yeah, that's it. We are dystopia.
Yes, Oh, Chris.
Yes.
Weren't we meant to join Uri Geller's micronation?
Yes, we were. So I think we should actually do this as a bonus episode of the podcast for the Patreon. We'll go through the process of joining Uri Geller's micronation. Well, we did have to, unfortunately, cancel our last episode. We were going to do one about where is Princess Kate after she disappeared and did a dodgy Photoshop effort. But then given the news that was out last week, a little bit in poor taste.
Yeah, so we basically cancelled that. We're going to have a whole new topic. Could be us joining Uri Geller's micronation in Scotland or wherever it was.
It was in Scotland.
On a rock somewhere. But yes, Chris.
Yes.
I think it's time, unless there's anything else you want to announce here, I think it's time to get into today's story.
All right. Now I'm ready to go. Hit me with it.
So this story is about a very hungry man named Tarrare. At least I think that's how you say it. I tried to find the right pronunciation. It's French. I'm not sure it's a real name, but it's certainly a nickname. People say it in lots of different ways, but I'm going to go with this one. So I'm so sorry for any French listeners who are like, oh my God, make it stop. So Chris, a little background. Tarrare was born around 1772 near Lyon, France. I say around 1772 because not much is known of this man's background in an official capacity, including his date of birth and legal name. So Tarrare was by no accounts a normal child. I mean, we're all different and that's okay, but Tarrare was born with something rare. An insatiable, unstoppable appetite.
Ooh.
It was bad enough throughout his childhood. Despite being fed, he would ask for more food almost constantly. And by the time he was a teenager, he could eat his body weight in beef in a single day. It was said he was able to eat a quarter of a bull in a 24-hour period.
Quarter of a bull?
Yes!
What a claim to fame.
He could eat a quarter of a bull in a 24-hour period. That's a lot of beef. So it's not known for sure where his nickname Tarrare came from, but at least one book featuring a chapter on Tarrare believed it could have come from the phrase "bom bom Tarrare," used to describe explosions in an old song. So the link is apparently when Tarrare himself, well, ripped ass, it was like an explosion.
Right.
Which is so gross, but, you know, after eating a quarter of a cow, I'm sure something would be happening down there that wasn't too pleasant. I think most people would die, but not Tarrare. So he was constantly sweating and emitting a foul odor on top of this. He would basically sweat constantly, and especially after eating large quantities of food. His eating problem was so bad that his parents actually forced him to leave home when he was in his teens because they could no longer afford to feed the bottomless pit that was their son.
Are you just relaying my life story?
I was about to say I know a few people like that, but but yeah, I don't think you were emitting the foul odor, and I don't think you were eating to the point where your mom had to throw you out onto the streets.
There's been times, but generally no.
One too many pot noodles at home, and she was like, right. Tarrare's eating problem was so bad that his parents forced him to leave, and the French gannet was now on his own. And with each growth spurt, he was getting more and more hungry. He ended up homeless, of course, begging for food, and teaming up with a ragtag group of robbers and prostitutes living a kind of nomadic lifestyle, where he would wander France and panhandle, basically for food. So eventually Tarrare was able to use his rare condition to make money. So this travelling scammer, who I assume touted snake oils and wonder drugs, took the hungry young man under his wing, and he used him as kind of like a support act of sorts. Before this charlatan took the stage, or the street, Tarrare would demonstrate his favourite pastime, eating copious amounts of food and bric-a-brac before an astonished and often disgusted crowd. So he would swallow apples whole without chewing them. He would guzzle down live animals, including snakes. He would gulp down rocks and bottle corks and pretty much anything that was laying or scuttling around. And the weirdest part was, he actually seemed to enjoy it.
Okay. Well, I mean, you've got to love what you do. I mean, if you love what you do, it's not really a job, is it? If you love eating bric-a-brac and various live animals, I mean, you do you, man.
No chewing, though. Swallowing a whole apple.
Ooh.
How?
He must have had I mean, I can only assume he had a very large mouth. Because, I mean...
Yes.
He must have been able to... Either he had a very large mouth or he could sort of unhinge his jaws and
like a snake.
Yeah, like a snake. And then maybe, I don't know, he just had a very wide gullet, like you said, and he could just go down there and it's like feeding time at SeaWorld.
Okay, so by age 16, Tarrare was performing solo. He was basically headlining his own act as a street performer on the streets of Paris, where the crowds were bigger and presumably the compensation was also for his bizarre skill set. So around this time in 1788, this is the first time that Tarrare was seen by a medical professional. So the story goes that during one of his acts, the hungry teen fell ill and he was transported by concerned onlookers to a nearby hospital. It turned out Tarrare had a bowel obstruction, which, I mean, no surprise, to be honest. Kind of surprising that it took this long, but yeah, first bowel obstruction, which was treated with, well, a shit ton of laxatives, which must have been really delightful for everybody working there. Fully flushed out and on the mend, Tarrare offered to demonstrate his chomping abilities to a surgeon named Gerard by swallowing the man's watch and chain. So he offered, like, hey, you want to see me do my thing? I could swallow your expensive watch and chain.
Hey, Doc, want to see a cool trick?
Considering why he's in there, it's like, no, I don't want to see my watch get lodged in your bowels. Thank you very much.
There's got to be some sort of ethical consideration here. It's like, if the doctor's just like, there we go, we've cleared the blockage. but could you just swallow this timepiece?
Imagine wanting your watch to pass through a man. So yeah, obviously the surgeon was like, I do not want to see any such thing. And he said that he would not hesitate to cut his valuables out of Tarrare with a sword if he did anything of the sort. So he was like, no, don't touch my watch. So he would later be examined by doctors again in the future, but we will get to that later. Chris, Tarrare is just 16 years old at this point in his weird life.
Okay.
We haven't talked about what he looked like yet. So would you like to have a guess of how he looked? Like, how do you imagine? He's just 16 at the minute, and you know what he does.
I'm imagining he is quite the porker.
How PC?
I would see. I'm picturing in my head. He's got right. So he's. Do you know those twins that rode on the motorbikes? I think they were also maybe wrestlers as well.
Excuse me? Twins that rode on the motorbikes?
They're in like Michael Jackson videos and stuff.
Oh my gosh, the like claymation.
Yeah, exactly that one.
Yes. Right, yeah.
They're like based on real people. The Maguire twins.
Right.
The world's fattest twins, Billy and Benny.
Oh, is that what they were actually touted as?
Yes, because it was a much crueler time.
As was the 1700s in France, apparently.
Yes. So I imagine that they are of similar stature to Billy and or Benny, or potentially both of them was old Tarrare. Is that what he was called? Tarrare?
Tarrare, I think.
Tarrare. Was old Tarrare. So I'm imagining sort of glutinous.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of, pouring out of the sides of his jacket, so on. I imagine being a Frenchman, he's obviously got some garlic around his neck and one of those stripy tops that would otherwise be a burglar.
You think you would have garlic? The man eats corks.
Yeah, to be fair, I mean, this is obviously munching garlic. He's got to replace it quite often.
Ah, okay. When people put like bullets around themselves.
Yeah.
Like Rambo style garlic.
He's got a bandolier of various things to eat. What else would he have? I think he's going to have a little flat cap on his head, and I think he has got a rather pathetic beard, being only 16. But he's trying to appear older than he is, so I think he's got himself a beard, and I imagine his eyes are rapidly disappearing beneath his chubby cheeks.
Okay. Well, that's a great description. We do have a detailed description of him, but first, let's take a look at this advertisement used to promote Tarrare's act. So keep in mind that this is an artist's interpretation.
Okay.
And we'll get to the factual description of him afterwards.
Right.
So, Chris, this is an illustration of our man Tarrare. If you could just describe it to the listeners, and we'll also put it on the Instagram, d.s.radio. Here you go.
Oh, okay. So this gentleman looks like he was in take your pick of a 70s rock band. It looks a bit like he was in Slade.
I was going to say Status Quo.
Yeah. He is not as chubby as I would have pictured him, at least at this stage.
He's not chubby at all, actually.
No, he's actually quite skinny.
Mm-hmm.
He's got long hair in a sort of bowl haircut style. And he's got various animals and things on the table in front of him. So he's got a snake. There's a crayfish, I think that is.
Yeah.
He's got a mouse in his hand. He's got the world's smallest bird in a cage.
Looks like a tiny pigeon.
Yeah. Either that or he's really big. There's some walnuts on the table as well. Presumably he's going to eat them whole. And there's a dagger as well.
Yeah.
And he's dangling a solitary white mouse in front of his face as if he's just about to chomp down on.
Yes, very, very nice description, Chris. So, I guess I've talked a lot, so I'll let you read my summary of a description of him here.
Tarrare had a pale complexion and was of medium height and a slender build. He absolutely heaved. He emitted such a foul odour that people had to stand 20 paces away from him just to tolerate it. He was pretty much always sweating. The skin of his stomach, when not filled to capacity with snake meat and rocks, sagged very low and was so stretchy that he could actually wrap it around his own waist like a little skin blanket. He had super thin lips and a large, wide mouth, and his teeth were stained. He could apparently hold a dozen eggs in there, sort of hamster-esque. After binging, his eyes would turn bloodshot and his face red.
Okay. Kind of ghoulish.
And, if I had a single friend, would he be open to meeting them after that description?
I would be open to meeting them. This sounds
Because what a catch.
very interesting. But you'd have to stand a good distance away. Yeah. Interesting guy. You can see why he had an early career on the streets of Paris doing some sort of sideshow act. It sounds very scary. Like, not to judge, but I just imagining this large mouth and him shoving whole unchewed things down it and them disappearing and having these bloodshot eyes and...
All right, don't get excited. These bloodshot eyes.
Bloodshot eye. Yeah, but it's kind of like, it's sort of like an old ghoul from an old movie or something. I don't know if it's just some poetic description, but hard to imagine in real life, like looking at a guy like that.
Yeah, it would be something to see, definitely. I mean, he's clearly got some kind of medical condition going on. Like, the fact that he seems to be consuming so much and seemingly not gaining the weight from it. I mean, fair enough if it's rocks and so on, but when he's eating all of his animals in vast quantities, he's eating a quarter of a cow, as you'd call it. he doesn't seem to be gaining much weight at all, so he must have some sort of condition where he's not gaining mass. But
yeah, exactly.
Then this stretchy stomach thing, what is that about?
Yeah, very good question. Can you imagine his MyFitnessPal app inputs? Like rock, calories in a rock. Calories in a whole snake.
Snake eater. Sorry.
But how many calories are in half a cow?
Let's Google it.
Do it. Do you think I guess it would be it's got to be like a domestic
quarter of an ox, wasn't it?
I think it was a bull, actually. So
quarter of a bull.
French domestic bull.
Okay, hold on. So, according to this Reddit post,
oh, here we go.
There's there's on average 1.1 million edible kilocalories in a average cow.
Damn.
That's a cow, not an ox, but we'll run with it. So you can say, roughly just over 250,000 calories.
And not an ounce of weight added. That is insane.
There's something funky going on in this guy's tummy.
Mm-hmm. What do you think Tarrare went on to do as a sort of career? So he couldn't keep doing his thing on the streets forever. He had to do something. Where do you think you went after this? I
think he probably went one of two places. 3 places.
So one of them KFC.
Well, he went to that, no matter which route you take. One of them he was going there. But he either... So it was modern day, I would say he was going to end up with his own show on the Discovery Channel.
It's the 1700s, Chris.
He was going... I know, I'm going with this, so hold on. Maybe there was a version of this in the past. He would go around from tavern to tavern and they'd be like, here, eat these 25 1700 beef burgers in less than an hour and you can win a prize. And he was like, solo. And then he ate them all and took all the prize money and made off at a very slow pace. Or
you're still talking as if he's some large creature. He's a very skinny man.
I would imagine the most likely thing would be he would go into the circus, some kind of sideshow act. And if he did put on the weight as well, maybe professional wrestling.
So a combination of the two. Well, Chris,
Yeah.
Tarrare enlisted in the military during the Revolutionary Wars.
Oh.
But there was a slight issue with this on the food front, Chris. And that issue was rations.
Yes, you don't get unlimited food in the army usually.
Oh, no, you don't. Now, the rations provided to a single soldier were no match for Tarrare, and he became so fatigued that he had to be admitted to the military hospital to be assessed. The doctors there suggested that Tarrare's rations be quadrupled, and were so amazed and perplexed by his condition that they requested to keep him there longer so they could study him. And he actually ended up staying there for a few months, and this is all recorded in a medical journal from the time.
Right.
So during his stay in the hospital, the extent of Tarrare's insatiable hunger was closely monitored, with unbelievable and, to be honest, disgusting results. So cat lovers may want to skip ahead here. While in the hospital, he managed to gain access to and gobble down food that had been prepared for 15 people, washing it down with gallons of milk. This food had been set up for a group of German labourers, and the doctors had been struggling to keep Tarrare away from it for the whole day. They eventually just gave in and let him gorge himself just to see what would happen. And they watched him eat every single morsel, basically licking the plates clean and hoovering up the crumbs of the tablecloth before passing out for hours. He took a live cat and bit into its abdomen, sucked out all of its blood, and consumed it completely. The fur later repeated on him, and he was seen vomiting it up, almost like coughing up a colossal hairball.
Whoa, okay.
During his initial stay at this hospital, they're having to keep him at bay and fend him off from other people's food, and sort of like spreads they put on for laborers. Like Tarrare's like a rabid dog. He's like all day they've got staff like defending this food, and he's trying to come and get it from like all angles and all sorts of schemes. It's funny, but it's also sad that he's like suffering to this extent. But it's just a hilarious like image.
Yeah, it must have been quite. It must have been quite difficult for him and for the army. But could they not have weaponized this a bit?
Oh, you're onto something, Chris. You are onto something.
Yeah,
but we'll get to that.
I mean, surely there must have been lots of prisoners.
Maybe. I mean, you're in the right direction. So, as a quick side note, though, I want to say, like, Tarrare wasn't, like, the only 1700s man to partake in the act of, like, cat chomping and, you know, eating gross stuff. There's, like, a lot of cases of people doing this, and also, especially in London for some reason, like, usually after being betted money or as part of some deviant rich people entertainment or for the sheer enjoyment of, like, eating gross shit. Like, it was kind of a bit of a thing. But Tarrare is like a studied case, which is why we've gone with this. So, while in the hospital, Tarrare also gorged himself on various reptiles and amphibians, and the hunger was never ending. The doctors were in absolute awe at both how hungry one man could be and the volume of food he could accumulate in his little stretchy stomach. Remember, Tarrare was really thin. So they were like, we're seeing this all go in there, but he's still hot. They were just, it boggled the mind. They were just like, we cannot explain this in any way. So let's not forget, he was enlisted in the military. He was still a soldier, and he wasn't getting off that easily. The military wanted him back, but the doctors were having so much fun experimenting on their own personal medical mystery that they were kind of hesitant to just hand him over. So they came to an agreement to join forces and combine their powers to make Tarrare into a weapon against the enemy. So Chris, you were sort of hinting what you thought before, but do you have any ideas of what they did with him?
I would say that two things.
Mm-hmm.
Either they use him to eat the enemy and turn him into a legend where they're like, oh no.
What was that? Why'd you always turn into like a chihuahua? Were you trying to do a...
Oh no, the belly. The belly is coming.
The belly.
He will eat us and everyone they care about.
The French belly.
Or
uh-huh.
they put their equipment inside his stomach and he transports it around.
Fucking bingo. So they decided that they would use Tarrare to smuggle important documents, a sort of like a courier. So he was to be employed as a spy, dropped behind enemy lines, transporting vital and top secret information from point A to point B with the help of his stretchy stomach and presumably cavernous bowels and anus.
This is sounding both like a Saturday morning cartoon and the worst porno I've ever heard of.
To test the idea, while he was still in hospital, they did kind of a little test run where they put some documents into a little wooden box and had Tarrare eat them. 2 days later, the package was excreted and delivered intact. So, he's ready to go. Tarrare's mission, if he chose to accept it, which he had to because it was a direct order, was to smuggle a message into Germany and deliver it to an imprisoned French colonel. A brief letter to this colonel was penned asking him to report any useful information on the enemy. It was then shot into a small wooden box and swallowed by Tarrare. It had also been described as a test message containing nothing of particular importance. Now, Tarrare, although impressive in many ways, was not the sharpest knife in the drawer. He was captured almost immediately by the enemy. He also could not sprechen Sie Deutsch, not a word, and he believed he was in possession of some kind of top secret documents, which he wasn't, by the way. He was basically just carrying a dummy message and he was the worst spy ever. The troops presumably sniffed him out instantly. Remember, people had to keep 20 paces away from this guy at all times.
Or the fact that in the middle of like introducing himself, yes, the name is Bond, it's James.
Poor Tarrare, though. He's not even that old at this point, is he? He's probably 20, early 20s or less. So he was searched, he was whipped, but he managed to keep those thin, wide French lips sealed for an entire 24 hours before confessing the following day under more pressure. He told the Germans that he had swallowed the box and note, and they tied him up and waited for a bowel movement. Tarrare passed the note, which was of little importance to the enemy, who pulled a classic, "It's just a prank, bro," and set up a whole fake execution to mentally torture Tarrare before cutting him loose. Beaten within an inch of his life and probably suffering from PTSD at this point, he was tossed back over enemy lines into home territory. He made his way back to the hospital in France, presumably in total shock and physical pain. Poor Tarrare. What a mission, Chris. What a mission.
Oh, yeah. And the fact that they were like, this guy's eating us out of house and home, let's just chuck him back over the board.
Yeah, like they pretended to hang him in front of a crowd, then laughed and cut him down. Kicked his ass back to France. That's just mean. But they must have known he wasn't a threat, and they must have thought it was completely bizarre. Like, you could not execute such a specimen, clearly, right?
No, definitely not.
Even the Germans knew that. They were like, nah, he's staying.
Even the Germans knew that.
No, I mean the enemy. The enemy was like, nah, we're not killing him. This is hilarious. So, obviously, back in France, Tarrare wanted to be cured. He wanted to have a normal appetite like a normal man and live a completely ordinary way. Like, let's be fair, like, his issue, which, you know, he was born with it, he didn't ask for this, it completely ruined his life. He doesn't have any contact with his family. He was just basically on the streets, then to the army, and then used as a courier, like, over enemy lines. Like, it's been terrible. It's so sad. Like, he never felt full. He was so desperate to eat all the time. It's torture, right? Like, Can you imagine feeling like you're starving constantly? To the point where you're eating rocks, like, on the side of the road so people can gulp at you. Like, It's actually really horrible.
Yeah, that's pretty extreme. You know, I mean,
Yeah,
sometimes,
it's awful.
I mean, everyone's been there. They're like, oh man, am I going to need a second pizza? But like to the point where you're
Are
like,
you okay, Chris?
I wonder what that dog tastes like.
All right, so back at the hospital, he pleaded with the doctors to try every treatment they had at their disposal. And try the doctors did. So they used various drugs and diets to no avail, and fed Tarrare a regular patient diet that the hospital provided to general patients. And although he tried really hard, the power of Tarrare's hunger and his empty, flaccid stomach would not allow him to go hungry. He needed food. He needed more food than the hospital and the military and the parents and his bosses could ever provide. He was incurable, and he needed to feed. So Tarrare got sneaky. He started to slip out of the hospital in search of sustenance, eating animal carcasses that he'd find in the streets, searching rabidly in trash piles, ripping discarded butcher's meats from the teeth of stray dogs, gulping down anything he could find, no matter how putrid or rancid, anything that was meat, no matter what stage of rotting it was in, he needed it. He was that hungry. That's how desperate he was. So, during the day while he was in the hospital, he began seeing what he could find around the building. And he developed some pretty disturbing habits. So, do you want to guess, or should I just tell you, Chris?
Just hit me with it. I would not like to speculate on this.
Yes, good choice. So, Tarrare began drinking the blood of other patients and eventually found himself in the hospital morgue, nibbling on the limbs of the dead. He was expelled from the hospital several times after being caught in the act, but the hunger continued to drive him back to the morgue. It was suggested that Tarrare belonged in a facility for the mentally unwell, but he did have one doctor on his side at the hospital who did fight for him to stay. Well, that is, up until a small baby went missing from one of the hospital wings and Tarrare was suspected of consuming it. And this was the final straw. Thoughts?
I think this is turning into a sort of like, you know, it's all fun and games to begin with, and then you went and ate a baby. It's an age-old scenario.
Such a simple way to put it, and yes, you're nail on the head.
Yeah, this is. I can see why people would be so interested. They want to study him. They want to see all of this stuff. But then when it starts turning into the fact that no, you're eating corpses.
Yes.
You're drinking the blood of live patients.
Yes.
And you're now eating children.
Allegedly.
Like, I mean, you can't. I mean, even if it's an allegation like that, even in the 1700s France, you got to do something about it, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, he was in the morgue chomping on limbs. I mean, a baby, when you're starving and you're Tarrare, probably looks pretty delicious. Okay, so Tarrare was completely banned from the hospital, of course, and he was turned out onto the streets and left to fend for himself. A few years later, in 1798, he turned up in another hospital. This time he was gravely ill after contracting TB, although Tarrare himself believed that he was suffering the effects of swallowing a golden fork, according to him. He unfortunately died after a severe bout of diarrhea that lasted several days. He was only 26 years of age.
Well, I mean, that's a sentence and a half. So 26, he died of diarrhea caused by a golden fork.
Well, he contracted TB, tuberculosis. That was the main issue. And then he got diarrhea. He died. He thought that he had like swallowed this golden fork and it was another bowel obstruction, but that wasn't the case. It was the diarrhea the disease and the diarrhea that killed him in the end. So
it's always the diarrhea that gets you.
Well, it is for a lot of people in a lot of countries, unfortunately. And back in the 1700s, it got our protagonist Tarrare too. So only 26 years old. So after death, You get an autopsy, right?
Oh, is this like when they cut the shark open in Jaws?
And,
There's like street signs coming out of him.
not quite, but I like where you were going with that. That would have been a lot more hilarious. But yeah, just trinkets from eras gone by. But yeah, after a few days, Tarrare's body was in a bit of a state, to say the least. It apparently decomposed way faster than the average corpse. So not a soul at that hospital wanted to perform an autopsy. However, the brave hospital chief surgeon, M. Tessier, stepped forward. And apparently, this is what Tessier found. So, when he prized Tarrare's jaws open with his hands and looked down, he could, fascinatingly, see all the way down to the stomach.
Okay, so it was just like a shaft going down.
Yeah, like he opened the jaws, he looked down, and he could see the stomach. Yeah, which explains how he was, swallowing entire animals and whatever, boxes of secret notes to the French colonels imprisoned in Germany. Yeah, it was crazy. He could see straight into the stomach. Now, put your snacks down for this next part, everyone. His stomach was absolutely filled with pus. And Tessier could get no further than identifying a few enlarged organs before tapping out and giving up completely, as the putrid stench was way too much for him. And of course, if you're wondering, no golden fork. Delightful. So, old-timey doctors were never able to diagnose Tarrare with any specific condition. Generally, they referred to it as polyphagia or hyperphagia. But do we know anything of any conditions today that might explain what was going on with him? Well, these days, if you search this case up online, it suggested that Tarrare had signs of hyperthyroidism, which is known to speed up the body's metabolism as well as damage part of the temporal lobe. We talked about that in so many episodes. It's responsible for various processes, including perceptual and motivational processes, and that involves food and hunger. So it's the primary area of the brain that regulates appetite. And if that is true, and that was the cause of his hunger, that must have been one damaged piece of brain meat for Tarrare, because I don't think anyone these days with like hyperthyroidism is going to the extent of sneaking into morgues and chomping on corpse limbs.
No, I mean, that's like a kind of it's almost like a meme at this point, isn't it? Like, oh, I've got hyperactive thyroids. Like, when, the people aren't just eating and eating and eating to the point where they're chomping down on inanimate objects.
Yeah, rocks and cats and puppies and snakes and corpses. Like, I've never heard of anyone doing that in modern times. I mean, granted, I haven't searched, but I'm pretty sure that would be in the news. Oh God, speaking of, for some reason, the algorithm, I don't want to say blessed, it provided a kind of news story today about a homeless guy chewing on the severed leg of a woman who had been hit by a train. Of all the times to lay my eyes up on something I just want to unsee, that was this morning.
Oh, lovely.
Anyways, so some have suggested that Tarrare could have had, I don't know how to pronounce this, but I think it's Prader-Willi syndrome. So let's look to the NHS website for a brief summary of the symptoms, Chris. And I'll let you read these because I have talked excessively in this episode.
Okay, so this is from the NHS website. If you're unfamiliar, that's the British National Health Service. So I'll try my hardest to do a British accent for this one. It'll be hard. Symptoms of Prader-Willi syndrome. Typical symptoms of Prader-Willi syndrome include an excessive appetite and overeating, which can easily lead to dangerous weight gain. Restricted growth. Children are much shorter than average. Floppiness, caused by weakened muscles, hypertonia. Learning difficulties, lack of sexual development, Behavioral challenges, such as emotional outbursts and physical aggression. Poor muscle tone in the gut, which can cause constipation or a swollen tummy. Tooth decay, because they do not produce much saliva. I love that the British website, the official government website, uses the word tummy.
They actually have to, I think, just to make it easier for all people to understand, apparently. Because they also say poo and fart, which I think is so funny.
I suppose that makes sense to put it in a language that anybody can understand. It's just,
layman's
the word
terms,
tummy is just very, very British.
It's very cute. But I think, I think it's good that they do that. Because, if they put it in scientific terms, some people genuinely might just be like, oh God, I don't know what's going on here. So yeah, Chris, these are like the general symptoms. Some I think fit and some don't. Like, the dangerous weight gain, definitely not. He wasn't shorter than average.
No.
About his sexual development, don't know. Don't think anyone ever reported that. And we don't know anything about his behaviour, really. We've learned that he liked to eat a lot and he was... I guess they were trying to say he was naive.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded like he had... And it mentions learning difficulties here. It definitely sounds like, as you said, that he wasn't what you would call, average intelligence. So maybe that would fit into it. Definitely the poor muscle tone in the gut.
Yes, and the tooth decay, because he was quite young and he had quite they said stained teeth, but who knows? There was definitely something up with them. So, But in the 1700s, who knows how normal that was?
Exactly.
And he was eating a lot of weird stuff. So let's take a look at some of the physical features of one suffering with the condition.
Distinctive features are almond-shaped eyes, eye problems, a narrow forehead at the temple, narrow bridge of the nose, a thin upper lip and a downturned mouth, unusually fair hair, skin and eyes, small hands and feet, and these features are usually noticed at or shortly after birth.
I mean, the advert didn't suggest that. Although, did it?
I mean, he's got thinnish lips in there, like as in they are thin, not that he's got the lips of a Finnish person.
Sorry, I don't know why that got me.
He doesn't. I wouldn't say he's got a narrow forehead. He's got a bit of a five head.
They did describe the thin, downturned lips, though. So I feel like in the written description, he had quite a froggish. It was quite a froggish description of him.
Yeah.
Like, the way he just opened his mouth and you could see into his stomach and then things just went down there. Like those 90s frog bins that you'd get in, like, swimming pools.
Oh, yes. You just have his mouth open constantly. Pay him a franc to swallow your garbage.
But yeah, like, the descriptions of him kind of remind me of those. I think he could have been useful as a disposal. Like, it didn't even have to be edible things. Any old junk you had, you could have threw it in Tarrare. But then again, it just came out the other end intact. So it's just, he could have been some kind of funnel. Or like a tube.
Straight in one end and straight out the other.
Yeah, but I guess that's kind of why he didn't gain any weight. Because he obviously you're not going to absorb anything from a box. But then again, the cat, the only thing he coughed up was the fur, right? So he was breaking it down in some way?
I mean, he's still human. At the end of the day, he needs calories to survive. But perhaps he took such few calories from the things that he ate that he needed to eat a shit ton of them. Literally.
This is what I was thinking too. Like, obviously he's not getting anything out of what he's eating. Even when it was meat and food and the food of 15 German labourers, he wasn't getting anything of it. And when he did binge, he slept for a really long time. Like, there's got to be a modern medical professional who has some kind of insight. But yeah, the last guess that we have here is just basically the last of the symptoms of people with the disorder, and that's surrounding appetite.
People with Prader-Willi syndrome develop an increased appetite and eat an excessive amount of food if they have the opportunity. The medical name for this is hyperphagia. Between the ages of 1 and 4, the child will start to show an increased interest in food, ask for extra food, and become frustrated when they cannot get extra food. Are we describing my son?
I was going to say, this sounds familiar.
It sounds like any toddler.
Yeah.
Just to reassure everyone out there, your child probably doesn't have hyperphagia. Food is a trigger for challenging behavior in people with Prader-Willi syndrome. This could include angry behavior to get food, hiding or stealing food, or stealing money to get food, eating inappropriate items, frozen or uncooked food, or waste food. A very good memory for people who've given them food in the past or situations where food was available. And people with Prader-Willi syndrome can tolerate much larger amounts of food before their body automatically vomits it back up, as they're not as sensitive to pain. Therefore, they can eat objects that would make other people very ill.
Now, this sounds just like our friend Tarrare, but it's quite common for people with that disorder to become really obese, which Tarrare was not. So like you said, I do wonder if he ever actually absorbed anything or got any benefits from any of the proper food that he ate. I mean, maybe he metabolized it extremely quickly, but yeah, that is pretty much the only suggestions for Tarrare's condition that we have in a modern age anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's really this, or he had something that's never been documented again by medical science.
Yeah, I mean there is another French guy who people usually reference. He was also, obviously, he was enlisted and he had the same kind of habits, and I think he was eating the leg of a soldier who got blown up on a ship that he was on and doing all sorts of Tarrare-esque things. But there's a few cases, but in the grand scale of things, you don't see much like that these days, and it's never really been explained, I don't think.
No, but then again, it's also, I imagine the opportunities to do such might have been a bit more in the 1700s, to do such crazy things. Because somebody today, if they were eating themselves to excess, they'd just be eating fast food all the time. They'd be eating all the readily available things. It's not quite the same feat as being like, well, I ate a quarter of a cow this morning, because generally you wouldn't buy a whole cow. It's a bit more, I suppose, overeating is somewhat normalized a bit more in society now, that somebody who had Prader-Willi syndrome, if that's what it was, I can't imagine they have quite the same behavior that's being described, but maybe that's more of the time and the availability of calorie-dense food.
Yeah, I did read on Reddit, like, people who have that syndrome, who have, like, family members who have that syndrome, that they actually have to sort of, like, put locks on the fridges and cupboards and everything. Like, it is that kind of behavior, which must be so stressful.
Yeah, I mean,
to live with that, But I guess you're right. There's access to quite calorific foods these days that you can consume a lot more calories in smaller amounts of food if you really want to, if you want to buy calorie-dense food. So you're right, you wouldn't have to sort of eat an entire cow. You could get it in another way, but yeah, oh God, I can't imagine living with that.
no.
It must be so stressful and like torture, really.
It sounds like it's got a lot of the qualities of addiction,
Yes.
but without the fact, but something that's just kind of, it's something that is naturally inside you, as opposed to
like a born addiction, yeah.
Yeah, but this, it's like, as you say, like you've got like 1-year-olds who are just asking for more food. Like that's got to be super hard to manage for the people, for both the families and the people who are affected by this seemingly awful syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the story of Tarrare is, I mean, it's funny in the way that it's sort of told and recorded. The reality of it is awful. But I mean, it's just, you couldn't write it, could you? Like, him being used as a spy because of his abilities, or quote unquote abilities, or just everything that he went through. Like, it's tragic, but there's just these elements in there that just make you go, oh my God, like, the medical professionals he had basically were just kind of almost viewing him as a sort of sideshow, even in the hospital. You know, just like, what is this? What's happening? God, I have no clue. And
let's experiment.
He just ends
on
up
this poor person instead of
this poor soul. Yeah, I mean, what a story, what a story. But yeah, it's sort of, I would say it's still a bit of a mystery as to what was really going on there. Could be the Prader-Willi syndrome, but I mean, God, who knows? I mean, he exhibited some of, but not all of the characteristics of the disease. So, you can't really prove or disprove it.
No.
But, yeah. So, Chris, we may not know what it was exactly, but, I mean, something came of it. Would you like to see that something?
Yes, I would.
Now, I think you might find this very enjoyable. We may not be able to explain, but we definitely can express. So, Chris, if you could just watch this and then explain to the listeners what you've just seen.
Okay. The depraved appetite of Tarrare the Freak at Tobacco Factory Theatres.
The cult is abnormally wide. The pot is filled with pus. A fact which accounts for the rapidness of decomposition. I'm so bring me the bone. I will split its skull and drink the brains. A dog. I will tear its flesh till none remain. I love you and now I die alone. Boy, the revolution needs you. Cause is calling you to war. Freedom, brotherhood, equality.
Okay. I'm going to hear that song. I'm so hungry. Every time I open the fridge from now on.
So, Chris.
Yes.
Did you enjoy that performance?
I'd like to see it. It's
Me too.
it's funny because I'm used to seeing that sort of thing when they use puppets, which I think's a great medium. But when they use puppets, usually the actors or the people controlling the puppets are sort of dressed like ninjas. They're all in black and you can't see anything. There's just random people dressed like they're about to deliver you half a pint of milk. Just kind of breaking out into song and playing violins.
I love it. I wish I could see it.
I would watch it. I would. It looks good. I don't know if there's a.
It looks amazing.
I mean, if there's a version online, I'd be happy to watch it. It was only on for a scant few days in January 2017, which quite
what
a
a
while
vintage
ago.
year.
Now, it feels like it was yesterday, but it definitely wasn't.
So, yes, Chris, I will take my bow here. That was the story of Tarrare.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I had not heard of this before. It was very interesting, and I want to know more about this gentleman. What did he have? What was going on with him? And do you know anybody who's got?
Are you hungry?
Are you hungry right now? Are you questioning everything you've ever done? Are you thinking, yeah, there was that night where I had 3 takeaways. Does that mean that I am the modern day
Tarrare
sideshow freak that apparently this gentleman became? Let us know. What are your thoughts? But thank you very much, Linz, for bringing this to my attention and all the listeners' attention. Listeners, not readers, as I called you in error the last time. But you did have to use your eyes. Probably most of you used your eyes to get to this episode. So I'm going to stick with it, dear readers.
And you've also been outed as an alien?
I did, yes. I had a slip where I've talked about. I used the word we. So thank you, Sinister Minister, for outing me as an alien to the entirety of our audience. But I think
shock to no
it's
one.
not that bigger news to anybody. That everyone knows I reside in Denver Airport.
Well, thank you for listening, everyone.
Yes, thank you, everybody. And we will see you next time on Dystopian Simulation Radio. And until then, maybe cut down on the calories just a little bit. Don't eat that dog. Don't touch that street sign. No, that's a lemur. No, stop it. Don't touch the baby.
Bye.